holiday, Shabbos, all that. And after last night, I got home and I was all prepared and left my notebook at home. So I'm glad we're at least together now and we can remember your dad and a wonderful man. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light. Long, long after that star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we love. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though that star itself is gone. But the stars that light up the darkest nights, these are the stars that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we'll remember. We remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember. We look for ways to be comforted when we are in so much pain and we are grieving. So we look to our sages, to our rabbis, and we read from Rabbi Alvin Fine. Birth is a beginning and death is a destination, and life is a journey. From childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and from grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage. A sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death is a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. Death has taken your beloved dad, our beloved Stephen. Our friends are grieving in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Stephen's love that united us in life in which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path, and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and his mind that brought us joy and happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. We are traditionally reading the words of the 23rd Psalm at this time. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binodeh sheyarbitzeni al mei menuchot yenahaleni, nafshi shovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek למען שמו, גם כי אלך בגץ על מוות, לא ירא רע כי אתה עמדי. שבתך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן, נגד צוררי דשנת ושמן ראשי. כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסר ירדפוני, כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We are just a little over a week into the new Jewish year, 5,785. That's a very old time here. It was a time that we had reflection, a time of reading poetry, a hope of returning and repenting from sin, a time of celebration as well. And now here we are together, joined in grief and in sadness, but also to remember and celebrate the life of Stephen Sindell. He was a beloved father and a grandfather. He was a dear brother and uncle. He was a fur dad to Roxy. Did I get that one right? Okay. And a very dear friend to Jessica and to Pete, to Daniel and Eliana, to David and Hiroko, to Deborah, to Aunt Carol and Linda, and to Noah, Benjamin, and Adam, who are all watching, hopefully via live stream. We offer you the absolute deepest condolences of our hearts. This day of mourning has come too soon, just 6 months after the passing of your beloved Ima, your beloved Rachel, who left us suddenly and before her time. But perhaps there can be a little bit of comfort in knowing that your parents are now together again, both of them looking down on all of you. Their presence is always to remain in your heart, in your mind. In the musical world, there is one symphony quite different from the rest. Franz Schubert wrote one movement, put it away, and died before he could finish it. We know it as the unfinished symphony. And though he did not have the privilege of finishing it, the entire world is richer in that it possesses this wonderful piece of music. For despite the fact that it breaks off before it is complete, it is nonetheless a masterpiece. There is a feeling of regret, Jessica, that we didn't get to see either your mom or your dad's life completely lived out the way it should be. We wanted a few more years on earth to finish putting those finishing touches on their life's symphony. But your dad was always working to complete each task, and your mom as well, to see each case through to the end and to leave no stone unturned in their quest for justice. This day has come too soon for all who loved him and care about him. Stephen Allen Sindell was born and raised in Cleveland, and he graduated from the Cleveland Heights High School. He went on to earn his undergraduate degree from Columbia in New York and graduated in 1964. During that time period, he also studied abroad in France at the Institut d'études politiques de Bordeaux and at the famed Sorbonne Université. He continued his education at the University of California, the Berkeley School of Law, where he earned his Juris Doctorate degree. He was the oldest child and the only son of Joseph and Ida Sindell, a wonderful sibling to Linda and Carol, and together they grew up, as I understand, with the usual sibling silliness. Carol shared with me that although her brother Steve was himself an accomplished pianist and cellist, he was a bit jealous of her incredible talents on the violin, and she became the center of attention. He did not like that. The jabs and the barbs flew about each other's technical skills, but in the end it all worked out. She mentioned that they finally learned to play music in harmony with one another and complement each other's abilities. Though his musical skills were evident and quite advanced, it wasn't the career he sought. Instead, he became a very well-respected lawyer and confidant, his passion channeling in new and exciting directions. Later in life, Carol had mentioned that she and her brother Steve became the closest of friends, sharing the same political views and having deep and meaningful discussions about today's political landscape. But we're not going there. He was also very enamored with foreign languages and cultures, especially something about Japan. Maybe it was the sushi, I don't know. He encouraged David, his son, to learn French and Japanese, and like his father, he took a similar career path and became a lawyer. Stephen was a traveling dad, and he was thrilled to be able to travel now to Japan. It afforded him more opportunities to work on his Japanese. David also mentioned that his relationship with his father grew stronger over the past few months as Grandpa Steve visited in California, connecting with his grandchildren in new ways as time now permitted. Stephen is most well known for his astonishing lawyer skills, and his principal interest was in civil rights and constitutional law. This passion led him to represent 12 of the 13 victims of the Kent State shooting in state and federal litigation throughout the 1970s. This culminated in his unanimous victory before the U.S. Supreme Court at the age of 31. And through this triumph, he established the right to sue public officials for violations of civil rights. He spent his life in commitment to social justice, to equality, and equitable access to legal representation for everyone. But he didn't do his work alone. He found that same burning passion for advocacy in his wife, Rachel. Along with her musical talents and her intense thirst for knowledge, he had found his soulmate. Together they raised Jessica and Daniel and instilled in both of you the values of a strong work ethic, love of music, and a compassion for all people. Jessica, you admitted to me that you were Daddy's girl. You were a real Daddy's girl. And your dad's support and your mother's support for all of your endeavors is what has kept you moving forward throughout your life. You inherited that strong sense of discipline and stick-to-itiveness, and those are the qualities that will help you navigate these difficult days, months, and years ahead without your two strongest and greatest cheerleaders. But you're in good hands with your beloved Pete. He was there for you and your family when your mother was sick, and he's here for you now. He will always be by your side and support you. Pete, I know that you were adored by Rachel and Stephen. All she ever talked about, oh, that Pete. Every time I talked to her, oh, that Pete. You were something else for her. They exploded with, you know how your mom had that little bit of that accent left. I know that. I'm married to the same thing. I know. And they were just exploding with joy that they got to watch the two of you exchange your vows and be at the wedding and celebrate all dressed up and just share this incredible moment. In the Bible, there are many descriptions of the type of people upon whom tradition places a very high value. One of the most striking is given to us by the psalmists in the 15th Psalm, and it says, "He who walks uprightly and practices justice, who speaks truth from his heart, on whose tongue there is no deceit, who does no evil to his fellow man." All right there. These were the qualities that characterized Stephen Sindell's life. He was an honest and upright person. He spoke the truth. He was dedicated to the triumph of justice in our society. He was a person of principle. He stood up for his convictions and to the causes that he believed in. He was the same without and within. Today we write this last chapter of the book of his life, and now his book is complete. All the entries that he made into the living volumes of his family, his friends, and all who knew him will continue to influence, to inspire, and to guide you in the years ahead. Zichrono livracha, may his memory always be a blessing to us. Jessica has a few words. A lot of words. We don't care. We like all the words. I'm going to put this up because you're tall.
I'm faking it because it helps. Okay. I didn't proofread this. I'm sorry. There might be some grammatical errors. Good morning, everyone. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for attending my dad's memorial today. Oh, shit. This is going to be hard. Whew. Sorry. I shouldn't say shit. Sorry. Oh, my God. My mom taught me that. Okay. Your presence means the world to me, and I hope that from somewhere out there, my dad can also see us here celebrating his incredible 82 years of life. As most of you may know, my mom passed away this March as well. She kept her illness in the dark from many of her friends and family up to the very end. It was important for her to leave this world with a strong image, as she was an incredibly independent woman. And as a result, she did not want any sort of gathering or celebration. That's just how Mama Rachel was, and we respected that. After my mom had passed, I remember asking my dad if he too wanted to brush things under the rug, thank you, and sort of pass away unnoticed, to which he responded, Jessica, are you kidding me? I'd love to be celebrated. Please invite everyone. And of course, deep down, I knew that this would be his answer, because it's the same answer that I would give. Please celebrate me, party it up, pop bottles, like father, like daughter. That's just how it was. Dad and I were so similar to one another, I'd say even more so than my mom and I. For example, my dad had an unstoppable love for spending money on the fancier things in life. Like whether it be gourmet foods, cashmere sweaters, 5-star hotels, you name it. And I don't blame him. Like, I do the same thing sometimes. Dad knew how to blow money a little bit too quickly. My mom, on the other hand, was the more practical figure in the family. She came from Holocaust survivor parents, so there was always this underlying fear that she carried of losing everything. And to her, having money meant having safety, and having safety meant having life, etc. So my mom made her very best attempts to keep the finances from completely disappearing, which is likely the reason why my parents still have a retirement fund today. And Dad gave my mom all the credit for that. Growing up, she constantly reminded us that materials, which she labeled as tchotchkes, are a waste of life and space, and they bring short-lived happiness. It was extreme. We got it. As she constantly reiterated that life's truest treasures were health, love, security, family, success, and happiness. Dad and I totally agreed with Mom's values, but we also couldn't help ourselves from time to time when there was a perfect moment to splurge and enjoy a luxury or two. Dad and I decided, out of respect for Mom, that we would just keep those moments to ourselves and not advertise them to her. So we weren't lying. It was just, keeping it to ourselves. For example, shopping for school supplies, which was one of my top passions in elementary school. I asked my mother to take me on that kind of shopping trip, and she would say with this Israeli accent, Jessica, elite Sindell, we pay enough for your education. Just reuse the folders and pencils from last year. So many eye rolls on my end, but I knew the drill. I would nod my head in agreement, wait until Mom left the room, and then immediately call my dad at the law office. The secretary would say, Sindell, Young, Goodivaldi, and Suker. Me, hi, can I talk to my dad really quickly? It's so important. Secretary, hold please. Dad, yes, Jessica, I'm busy. What is it? Me, hi, Dad, this is really important. Can we please get new school supplies before the semester begins? I can't be that loser with a dusty-looking pencil case. Dad, did you ask Mom already? She can't take you? Dad, she's Israeli. She doesn't get the American way. I need new supplies or I won't be cool. Dad hesitated, as there was always a little bit of guilt on his end if we went behind Mom's back. But his response was, okay, let's have a daddy-daughter brunch date at Corky and Lenny's this weekend, which was our secret language. And we would just have a very, very, very long daddy-daughter date at Corky's, which somehow accidentally included a mini shopping trip to Target and Staples. We just fell into it. I'm pretty sure Mom had us figured out, as she clearly would see me sneak up the stairs with multiple Target bags under my shirt. And I remember one of those times she was yelling at my dad in the kitchen, Steven, what is this? Where are all these bags coming from? And my dad would just take one for the team because he was the best like that. Dad and I also possessed the special gift for not being able to play piano very well. There was absolutely no delicacy to our touch. As many of you may know, my mom was an incredibly talented, classically trained pianist. Our home was constantly filled with her playing Chopin mazurkas, Rachmaninoff concertos, you name it. My dad noticed that my face would light up whenever she would play. So in response to my excitement, he offered to give me piano lessons instead of my mom, which makes no sense as he knew so little when it came to playing the piano. But I agreed to his offer, and I'll never forget our first lesson. He taught me chopsticks and a few fundamental piano chords with terrible hand technique, all the things that he knew. After that, I was finding ways to bang out my favorite Broadway songs with those 4 chords, thanks to Dad. My mom attempted to take over and teach me more seriously with the hopes of refining those clunky skills. But unfortunately, she learned quickly that I was not a natural on the piano, and we ended up bickering every time we had to work one-on-one. For some reason, I just took to my dad's terrible piano instruction over my mom's, and that's probably why our piano careers were so short-lived. But as a side note, I will say that I owe so much of my flute career success, oh my God, that's live now, to my mother, as she drove me to all of my flute lessons and schlepped me back and forth to all of my youth orchestra rehearsals with great pleasure. Dad and I also adored going to NYC together, New York City. I'll never forget our first daddy-daughter trip to the city. He was a proud Columbia graduate, and he wanted to show me the campus, what city life was really like. As a Clevelander, that world was foreign to me. I only saw it in pictures. It sounded like a dream. We arrived into the city, and I remember holding Dad's hand, jumping up and down with so much excitement. The stores, we could shop everywhere, the restaurants, the glitz, the glamour, the Broadway. Oh my God, I wrote so much. The Broadway shows, the musicians. I remember Dad telling me how much he adored watching the thrill I experienced when seeing the city for the first time. He took me to my first Broadway shows, The Lion King, Wicked, and Chicago. And I'll never forget how after Wicked, Dad patiently waited with me outside the stage door until Idina Menzel came out with hints of green paint still left on her face after playing her role as Elphaba. I used to act at Heights Youth Theater, so Dad knew how deep my love for musical theater was. We got Idina to autograph my program, and I remember hugging him and thanking him for that unforgettable moment in time. I remember him taking me around his Columbia campus, telling me about his experience as a student there. I remember eating our way through the city together and, best of all, our shopping trip excursions, which once again, we agreed that we would not highlight that part of the trip when telling Mom about it. One last incredible memory I will never forget is when I was spending the summer of my senior year of high school at Interlochen Arts Academy for flute and orchestra performance. It was an exciting time in my life as I was finally going to be away from home for many weeks without my parents. My mom had a tendency to over-shelter me from high school parties, so my experience was very limited and fresh. My dad came to visit me at Interlochen that summer on his own. He was a fellow alumni from years past, so it was exciting for him to see me go there as well. When a parent visits at Interlochen, they can request special permission for their kid to go off campus for the rest of the day. Dad let the office know that I had that permission. He took me out to dinner and brought me back to the cabins for the night. Because I technically still had that special permission to leave the campus, I snuck away to a party that the camp counselors invited me to. Many shots of vodka were offered, and I said yes to each one of them every time. And I had no idea what my limit was, so yeah. The party became a blur, and the next thing I remember is my dad coming to pick me up because one of the counselors called him on my phone due to how drunk I was. I remember crying to my dad how embarrassing this was and how Mom would murder me if she found out. And I remember my dad just chuckled and went out of his way in the middle of the night to buy me Tylenol and a loaf of bread, which taught me the importance of having carbs on the ready when you drink way too much. And he pinky promised to never tell Mom. It was our little secret, my first time drinking myself silly. I promised my dad that this would be the last blackout drunk moment ever, to which he responded laughing. And now I get why, because he knew there would be a few more moments like this in my lifetime. And Dad was totally right, but I'm still here. Yeah, I could ramble on and on, which I'm doing. There's so many incredible memories and lessons that I've learned from both of my parents. They've been so supportive throughout the entirety of my 35 years on this planet. They were my biggest cheerleaders, sometimes to the point of embarrassment. After I won my position with the Cleveland Orchestra, a time when my parents were in a healthier place, they came to as many concerts as they could to see me and my colleagues perform. Attending Cleveland Orchestra concerts wasn't new for them, as they had been going since before I was born. But now there was this new added excitement for them, as they could also hear and see me. Whenever my parents gave me a heads up that they would be in attendance of a concert, I would make an attempt to situate myself on stage slightly earlier than usual. The reason being, because I had to prepare myself for when my dad would stand up proudly and wave his whole body with so much joy just to get my attention from his balcony seat. And it gave him so much pride to see his daughter on that stage. I tended to feel embarrassed because he would continue to wave after I already gave him a very obvious, I see you, Dad. He would just keep, sometimes I remember seeing my mom shushing him and sitting him back down. And when I look back on it now, I can't tell you how much I'll miss that. It gave my parents so much nachas to see that I made it in such a cutthroat industry, let alone into the orchestra that we all adored more than anything since before I was born. Hold on. It's a hard realization, knowing that I will no longer be able to see either of them again in the balcony of Severance Hall, or hear them start every phone conversation with, "What are you playing on this week? Who's the conductor? What's the repertoire? Is it a shit contemporary piece on the first half or a good one? Will we like it? Should we just come for the second half?" Literally. Oh my gosh. Truly, I had the most incredible parents. I still can't stomach or fathom that both of them are now gone within the span of 8 months in between one another. We really believe that my dad's health began to decline due to how attached at the hip he was to my mom. In a way, it romanticizes their endings here on Earth. I really do hope that their energies are somehow together. I hope that they were able to find each other wherever they are, if they are. My dad wasn't much of a believer in that kind of stuff, but I think I am. And my parents were such badass lawyers. They did so much together. They were the best of friends. They were both obsessed with date nights at the restaurant Anatolia, accompanied by a movie at the Cedar and Lee Theater, preferably a Holocaust movie. It's so weird. They love the Holocaust. Okay. I mean, that's not a good thing, but okay. They were huge role models to my brother Daniel and I. They were so dedicated to providing us with the best education in Cleveland, and my mom never hesitated to remind me of how expensive the tuitions cost them. Our parents were open to all topics of conversation. They were absolute weirdos in the best sense. They totally found ways to embarrass us in public, and they leaned on one another for strength when times were tough. I think what I love most and will never forget is how Mom and Dad continuously emphasized the importance of a female's independence and how I should never have to rely on a man for financial comfort. Sorry, Pete. They constantly urged me to chase my dreams and dare to fail, to create opportunities for myself rather than wait for them to happen. My dad always said that he wanted for me to enjoy the fruits of my own labor. They both encouraged me to take as many auditions as possible. Whenever I would feel knocked down or an audition wouldn't pan out, they motivated me to pick myself up as gracefully and quickly as possible and move the F forward. And as my mom would say, one foot in front of the effing other. We were all relieved, though, when my career led me to a dream job at the Cleveland Orchestra. I am beyond thankful that my parents were alive and well to see my husband Pete and I get married. They absolutely adored Pete. He is the emotionally stable Italian, helping to hold a family of neurotic, anxious Jews together. It doesn't hurt that he is a doctor either. My mom loved that. Pete was there for my parents during their happiest and most vulnerable and darkest moments, and I know that they left this world feeling grateful for his strong presence in their lives and relieved to have left me in the best hands. We will miss my mama, Rachel, and my dad, Stephen Sindell, with all of our hearts, and I feel beyond lucky to have known them and have been raised by them for 35 incredible years. Thank you. That's it.
You want to say something? Please. Come on up.
Good morning. For those who don't know me, my name is Kathy Bolick, and I've known Stephen since the 1990s, or as my kids say, before the turn of the last century. I was a new lawyer. We practiced in the same field. He knew my boss. He'd call her for advice, and at some point she told him that if she wasn't available, he should talk to me. And at that point, Stephen adopted me, basically. Unlike most experienced lawyers talking to a new lawyer, he didn't want to tell me about his experience. He wanted to hear about mine. He wanted my opinions. We talked a lot about trends in employment law, how facts would play out, what courts got wrong, and how to make the right argument to get the best results for the clients. To be completely honest, I was really busy, and I didn't have a lot of time to discuss philosophical arguments. And sometimes Stephen wanted to talk a lot longer than I wanted to, and if you knew him, you may have had a similar experience once or twice. About a year after I met him, the partners in my firm had a falling out, and I needed to make a job change. And Stephen asked me to come work for him. I'm not sure he cleared that with his partners at the time. He could be impulsive that way, but I did. And working with him, I got to know Rachel and Jessica and Daniel as the voices on the phone, because as Jess said, Stephen would drop everything when his kids called or his wife called. And it was mostly his kids who would call. And Jessica, I don't know if you know this, and I'm sorry to tell you, but I may have heard a few of those conversations because Stephen loved speakerphone. When I got engaged, Rachel offered to play piano at our wedding. She was, I think, just finishing up at the Cleveland Institute of Music at the time, getting her master's in classical piano. And having her play on the Steinway during our cocktail hour was one of the highlights of our wedding. And I can still see Stephen beaming with pride next to her while she played. Stephen and I worked together for about 5 years, and we remained friends. He went to practice with Rachel. I went to a different firm. Anyone who knew Stephen would only describe him with superlatives. He was never average, and he never evoked indifference in anyone. If there's one word I would use to describe Stephen, it would be outrageous. Stephen was outrageous. He was outrageously intelligent, outrageously interesting, outrageously well-traveled and well-educated. I represented him once in a fee hearing he was working with Jim Boyle, who's in the back, and we had to present evidence to the court that the amount of fees they were seeking for a trial that they had won was a reasonable amount of fees, and that meant that I represented them and I had to put them on the stand and justify their hourly rate and how many hours they put into the case. And the other lawyer was very dismissive of Stephen because he felt very superior. And when I pointed out that Stephen was an Ivy League educated lawyer who graduated from one of the top law schools, Stephen shushed me. He shushed me. He loved his everyman image. He never wanted people to know that he was fluent in Japanese and French, and he'd studied at the Sorbonne, and he graduated from Columbia. That was not the image he wanted. And he was outrageously funny. He had outrageous stories that I don't feel like I can share, really, here. I can still hear his laugh. To know Stephen is to know that deep belly laugh when something amused him, and it was absolutely infectious. He always spoke plainly and clearly. He never put on airs. He didn't have a pretentious bone in his body. He liked the finer things in life, but he liked food and experiences, not things as much. He didn't care about what people thought of him. I loved that about him. If you were close to Stephen, I guarantee there was a time that you got mad at him. I mean, really, really mad at him. But you could not stay mad at Stephen. Whatever you were mad about was Stephen being Stephen. He said what he meant, he did what he thought was right, and he didn't worry about what other people thought. He loved his family intensely, intensely. He was literally bursting with pride every minute of every day about each and every one of you. As was your mom. Mom took a different approach. I'll give another, maybe you don't know this, confession. Pete, they loved you. But at the beginning, when Jess was dating the doctor, there may or may not have been some phone calls, and there may or may not have been some investigation. Just some little background research. I may or may not have been involved. You passed with flying colors, everything. If there's anything in your background, we'd invite it. Stephen wasn't one to sit around talking about sports or the top bands or television shows. Stephen's favorite hobby was humanity. He wanted to talk about the world, about fighting injustice, always, about how people feel and think and what motivates them. He truly wanted to debate ideas. He was always and truly intellectually curious, with an article or a book to recommend that he found insightful or inspiring or something that just made him view things differently, and he wanted to share that. He was unlike anyone I've known. He was irreplaceable, and I will miss him.
My name's Alan Shapiro, and I represent the historical past. I'll be celebrating my 86th birthday, October 20th. And I've known Steve Sindell probably since he came to Cleveland to practice law. Now, it goes back farther than that. My father was raised on 30th and Scoville on one corner. On the other corner lived Abe Dudnick. On the third corner lived Sam Comito. On the fourth corner lived the Sindell brothers. My father did not get along with the Sindell brothers, nor did Steve really get along with all the Sindell brothers. And when Steve became a lawyer and came back to Cleveland, I told my father that I had met this young lawyer that really, I think, could try cases and get us some big verdicts. We had a big workers' compensation practice. My father said, not with the Sindells. I said, why? He says, it goes back a long time. How far? Back to the Spanish Civil War. Uh-oh. The Sindells, he said, backed the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. Those of you who know your history remember that was the communist organization in the United States that backed the Republican Army against the fascists. My father was a strong Teamster spokesman and said, the communists are bad news. I tell the Sindells, stay away from them. They're no good. He says, go with the labor unions. They didn't listen. Now, I had to get his permission, because I practiced law with him, to do cases with Steve. He met Steve, he liked Steve, he says, okay. And from thereafter, I used to send Steve maybe 5, 6, 8, 10 cases a year, and pretty damn good cases. And we would go out and sign up the clients together. And when you're driving out to Ashtabula or Findlay or someplace like that, you get a chance to know a person. You're sitting in the car with them for 2, 3, 4 hours. And finally came a day. Oh, and Steve was doing this cases with Kent State and this and that. Didn't appeal to me much. After all, where was the money? You were going to spend a lot of time. Show me the money. Well, came a case, Cunningham against the Cleveland Plain Dealer and I think the Gateway Trucking Company. And I go over to Steve. I said, Steve, we got a bell winner, but I'm not sure we can win this case. We got to sue the Cleveland Plain Dealer and this big trucking company. And we have to prove that you can sue an employer if they intentionally violate the workers' compensation law. Steve says, teach me all about it. And we do. And we sue. Of course, we lose. And we go to the Court of Appeals. We lose again. We go to the Supreme Court, and we win. We can sue them. Now we go to a pretrial. And I'll get to the end with this. Steve and I go to the pretrial. And then one of the great miracles happen. A man comes into the room with a briefcase, and he issues the magic words. And to a lawyer, these are magic words. He said, I'm from the overage carrier. Any of you who practice law might know overage carriers start with coverage of about $1 million. Let me tell you, that is music to a lawyer's ears. And Steve starts negotiating. We're there about an hour and a half, and there's a lot of black chips on the table. Let me tell you that. And I'm sitting next to Steve. I'm a workers' comp lawyer. We deal in small amounts, lots of cases, but small amounts. I say, Steve, there's a lot of black chips on this table. And Steve never forgot that with me. I said, let's cash in the chips. He says, now there's more black chips. Another hour goes by, and there's more black chips. And finally, Steve says, you got a deal. I went out and bought a new house after that. I want you to know that, for my share of it. And that speaks to Steve. That was the kind of guy he was. I didn't see Steve for a while, a number of years. And last year, I ran into him, and I understand it was his favorite place, at Heinen's. And we kissed right there at Heinen's. And I say, Steve, we got to go out to dinner. And we did. You're with your mom And Steve, we went to Valerio's, my favorite restaurant, and we had a marvelous dinner. And I learned your mom was ill. And I've talked to Steve. I talked to Steve several times after that, not just a couple of months ago. I really didn't know he was ill. And when I read it in the Jewish news, I was just totally devastated. And please accept our condolences. He was a great man, and he knew how to play with black chips.
This has been an amazing morning. I love you. If I'm ever in any legal trouble, I know who to call. Good shit. Raise your hand if you're a lawyer. Great. Fabulous. All right. Well, I got service. I knew your parents in a little bit different way because I knew your mom through piano and playing in different Jewish programs. And they used to come over, as you know, I told you. They used to stay outside in the porch with us, hang out in our home. And they loved my grandchildren, my little ones. And they loved to ask about, your mom called what's with Hadari? She loved to know what they're playing on the piano. And you should just know that they were amazing. I think you heard these tributes today, and you know yourself what amazing, amazing people they were. And you will miss them, and we will all miss them. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember them. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember them. And I think most of all, when we have joys that we want to share, we will remember them. So long as we live, Stephen and Rachel also live because we remember them. Adonai natan ve'Adonai lakachi, hi shem Adonai mevorach. God has given, and now God has taken them away. Blessed be the name of God. We ask those who are able to rise at this time for the traditional words of El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, shochen b'amromim, hametzeh menucha nechona, tachat kanfei shechina, im kedoshim u'tohorim, kezohar harakia mazirim, et nishmat hayakar shelanu, שהלך לעולמו. בעל הרחמים, יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Stephen Allen Sindell, son of Joseph and Ida, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. That concludes our service here. And I know that you're going to continue on. Did you want me to announce it? Did you? Yes.
Sorry, we're going to have some deli meats. You guys hear me? What? Yeah. We're going to have some deli meats and lox from Jack's Deli, which was Steve's favorite, at 1 University Circle, which is where he had just moved on the top floor. The receptionist in the front will know where to direct you. We'll probably be there, around noon. So if people would like to continue celebrating Steve's life, you can join us there.
Is there any bread?
There's much bread. Rye. Yeah.
We went to Anatolia with them. They love that place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And really, thank you for sharing, and continue to share these stories with Jessica, with Pete, with the family, because that's how his soul will continue to be elevated towards God. Peace. Peace to you.
Pleasure. Sorry to be here on this. Yeah, pleasure to meet you. Thank you for the words. Thank you. Stories. Right now they're at home. Yeah, we have ours. Oh, we have 3 dogs now. Yep. 3 different sizes. Inverse age. Yep. Littlest one is the oldest, biggest one is the youngest. Nah, not really. She's terrified. The bigger ones kind of ignore her. They're nice to her, but they run and play. Roxy sort of just stays put, stumbles around, has anxiety. Yeah, maybe a 4th one. Yeah, another time for sure. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, there's a lot not happening.